Can you feel it? It's time for the hottest hitting show ever dedicated to the sport of mixed martial arts. They're hitting right where it hurts and choking out the competition. It's the Rear Naked Choke coming at you live.
That's right, Tim Hughes coming at you in our version of live. It's Rear Naked Choke Radio. Glad to be with you here. It's been a while, but it's Joe Rizzo, as usual, bringing you the MMA content that you've been looking for so long as we get ready for UFC 269, Oliveira versus Poirier, which is a dual championship fight card, because at the top you have Charles Oliveira versus Dustin Poirier with the lightweight belt on the line, and you have Amanda Nunes, the longtime champ, against Juliana Pena for the women's bantamweight championship. The rest of the fight card coming up, we'll only jump in a little bit here, not do the deep dive so much. A little quick show just to get on the board and let you know that we're still around. You can follow me at Rear Naked Choke, all one word, on Twitter, and you can follow the show at RNC Radio. We've talked for years about like the changes and stuff that are coming on, but whatever. We're still here. We're still doing our thing. And by we, I mean me. So my other show that I've been concentrating a little bit more on with everything going on with baseball is called Diamond Diehards. So if you haven't checked that out, that's a podcast about baseball and about life. And I'm joined most of the time by my co-host, Jeff the Dog Healy. Follow that everywhere at Diamond Diehards. And if you want to check out more about Rear Naked Choke Radio, everywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify, plus YouTube. It's all on there, but the extensive library, not even all of it, but we've been doing shows on this show and under this name, or some version of this name, since 2007, if you could believe that. When women's MMA wasn't really a thing, we were with it. We were there. We were there when it started. There was a we back then. Now it's just mostly a me until I bring somebody else in. Most importantly, you want to know about the fights, and this one is so good that it brought me out of my little tunnel. Charles Oliveira, he's got that belt, the post-Khabib belt at lightweight in the UFC is quite an interesting thing here. This is going to settle it, I think, pretty much once and for all now that Khabib Nurmagomedov has retired, and he's when you hear him talk, I guess he leaves the door open a slight little bit, but if he comes back, he's going to have to at least probably beat one or two people at this point before he gets his title shot. So it's really Oliveira against Dustin Poirier for that coveted belt at 155. This, if you're just checking this out at any given time, I'm doing this show on Friday, December 10th, and the fights take place on Saturday, December 11th at T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas. So the first things first, we always like to look at what Vegas is saying about this thing, and we'll just go with the DraftKings lines here that I have up. And the DraftKings lines have Poirier as a slight favorite at minus 140 to Oliveira, the slight underdog, at plus 120. What does that mean? That means if you bet $100 on somebody who has a plus next to their name, which is Oliveira, the underdog, you bet 100 to get back 120 if he wins. And if the minus is there, you bet that amount, in this case, minus 140. So you'd bet 140 to get back 100. So explain that a little bit for the novice gamblers, or for those who are not really into the gambling part of it and you just like to watch the fights. This does give you a good Vegas perspective about how more than just the public is seeing the fight, and sometimes you can get a little bit better angle on a fight than have it be a little bit different than what you expect. A lot of people might think, well, Oliveira, he's technically got the belt here and he should be favorite. In fact, he's not. And why is he not favorite? Well, there's probably a few different reasons, And the main one is that Dustin Poirier is just really good. And he's been really good for quite a run here. Essentially, his last loss to anyone that's really around uh, that wasn't named Khabib Nurmagomedov is all the way. You have to go all the way back to September 17th, 2016, when Michael Johnson beat him. And since then, it's been the Poirier show. He beat Jim Miller. He had the no contest against Eddie Alvarez. That was when the illegal knee when Poirier was down. So eventually they did run that back. Then he beat Anthony Pettis, who still had a lot more cachet back in 2017 when that fight happened. Knocked out Justin Gaethje in 2018, and then in the full blown rematch, knocked out Eddie Alvarez now already 3.5 years ago. Max Holloway was the fight in which he won Poirier the interim lightweight championship. So he beat him, got the title shot, then against Khabib, and it didn't go his way with the rear naked choke. That's we're already back to UFC 242, and that's over 2 years ago. That was September 7th, 2019. Since then, the unanimous decision over Dan Hooker, the pretty famous now knockout and then doctor stoppages of Conor McGregor a few months apart here earlier in the year, January 24th and then July 10th. One midway through the second round, that was UFC 257, and then UFC 264, the doctor stoppage where McGregor doesn't answer the bell for round 2 because of the oh snap moment. So those victories in hand, that's really why you have Poirier as the slight favorite here. And then you go to Charles Oliveira, who, when you see him in the cage, he's vicious. And then when you see him outside the cage with his big glasses, he looks like the lead singer from Digital Underground, who was telling you to do the Humpty Hump back in the day. I mean, he doesn't look, he looks a little geeky and not too much of a fighter. His winning streak is impressive, but for different ways, and there's some familiar names in there as well. He doesn't quite have he doesn't quite have the trophies on the wall the same way. His wins since starting in June 2018 came against Clay Guida, then Christian Giagos, Jim Miller, David Tamer, Nick Lentz, Jared Gordon, Kevin Lee, Tony Ferguson, and the most impressive, which was back at UFC 262 in May when he knocked out Michael Chandler. And that's where the vacant UFC lightweight championship belt became his. And that also gave Charles Oliveira the UFC record for most finishes with 17. So he's been around for a while. Now he's got the 8 losses on his record, but the key thing for most fans is that 4 of those came in a 6-fight span, starting with August 23rd, 2015, when he lost to Max Holloway. Then he beat Miles Jury. He came back, lost to Anthony Pettis and Ricardo Lamas, beat Will Brooks, and then lost to Paul Felder. So at that point, Oliveira had dropped to 22-7. He wasn't quite the hot prospect anymore that he had been when he had pushed his record to 20-4 back, earlier in 2015 when he beat Nick Lentz, and that was a 4-fight winning streak. Prior to that, when he had gone up in class to face Cub Swanson and Frankie Edgar, and now we're going back to 2012 and 2013, he came up short in those fights, and he had lost previously to Jim Miller and Cowboy Cerrone. So the idea was at that point, after starting his career with 14 straight wins, once it looked like Oliveira was a guy who, once he was going up in class a little bit, was going to have trouble. And basically anybody else, out of a top 5 or top 10 scenario, really probably more like a top 5, top 3 scenario, anyone outside of there, he was going to beat. But when he got up to the big chances here, he was going to be in a little bit of trouble. Now, the thing with this streak that he's on right now is you got to determine what level you put Michael Chandler at and what level you put Tony Ferguson at. And if you put those guys in that top 3 type level there, then you say he's got a real chance here, because he's definitely going up in class when he's facing Dustin Poirier. But what Poirier's shown is that he can go up in that class, and as long as the guy's not named Khabib, he's going to beat him. So for that reason, I think this will be a great fight. I think this will be a great fight. But I see Poirier as a nice bargain, as just a slight favorite here. I think he should probably be a more significant favorite just because of what his track record is. And in some of the other casinos, he is a little bit more of a favorite than the -140 there. So I think this is going to be an exciting fight. I think you could see a finish either way. I wouldn't be surprised if Oliveira won, but I just think Poirier has the edge, and he just has a few more ways to win the fight here, and mainly because he's just done better when he's been in this level of a fight. So we started off, and now if you've gotten through this far, well, then you could be happy. You could go turn it off and go do something else. We got the good part over with, because the Amanda Nunes Juliana Pena fight, Nunes, as you might expect, is -1,000. That means if you want to win 100, you got to put up 1,000. That's about as big as a favorite as you usually get. Juliana Pena is +650. So if you think for some reason Juliana Pena is the one that's going to finally dethrone Amanda Nunes, then you're going to get paid handsomely for, you don't have to bet a heck of a lot if you want to win a lot here. But the problem is that you need Juliana Pena to actually win the fight. Now, the good news is that she's going to be in the fight. So if she's in the cage, she has a chance to win. The bad news is that Amanda Nunes hasn't lost. Now, it's all the way back to September 27, 2014, when she lost to Kat Zingano. That dropped her to 9-4, and she basically became a different fighter after that, and has evolved into the greatest champion on the female ledger of the UFC and MMA history here. And she's taken on all comers. She goes from bantamweight to featherweight, and she just has nary a problem at this point, no matter who she's facing. Pena, look, if you want to make the case for Pena, it's that her mileage is low. And at age 32 now, you could say her experience is high. But what does that really mean? Well, the first problem is this. Juliana Pena has won 2 fights since 2016. And if you go all the way back into the beginning of her career, she fought 3 times in 2009. She didn't fight in 2010. She fought once in 2011, once in 2012, twice in 2013, twice in 2015, once in 2016, once in 2017, didn't fight in 2018, once in 2019, once in 2020, and once so far here in 2021. So Juliana Pena doesn't have high mileage, but she also might not have quite the level of experience. And of her 4 losses, as she's got 10 wins and 4 losses, she's 2-2 in her last 4 fights. And she's also had an issue when she's gone up in class. Now, one thing she does have is she has a win over Kat Zingano, who is, as we mentioned before, the last person to actually beat Amanda Nunes. But that ship has sailed, and it's hard to say what a fight in 2016 means really in 2021. But she went up against Valentina Shevchenko in 2017 and she got armbarred. She beat Nico Montano in 2019 and then faced the Iron Lady, Germaine de Randamie, and that was her 2020 fight, and she got guillotined by a stand-up specialist. So that might tell you a little bit about that. And then the big win that she had this year is she dropped a rear naked choke on former Olympic silver medal wrestling medalist Sarah McMahon, who, by the way, was 40 at the time of that. Now, not to take away anything from Sarah McMahon, she's a freak of nature, but that's your signature win at this point. So, what are the paths to victory for Pena? I mean, she's got to hope that essentially Nunes really takes her for granted, which Nunes, I haven't seen Nunes, this version of Nunes, the championship version, I haven't ever seen her take anybody for granted. So I doubt it's going to happen here. And it's just difficult to make money on a fight like this unless you have real deep pockets and you're willing to incur a risk. But I doubt that Nunes is really going to experience little if any trouble here. And if you wanted to try to make money on this fight, you could start opening up the prop bets, and say you could try to get Nunes winning by submission, and you might get plus 400 on DraftKings for that. It's fight goes to a decision, doesn't go to a decision. I mean, if you think Pena could last 5 rounds, you can get plus 300 on that. But most of the other stuff, if you're looking to make any kind of money here, you could use this fight as part of a parlay, but you might not even bother. And if you think Pena somehow is a live underdog here, which I don't think that she is, and nobody loves live underdogs more than me. I don't think that she is. And I would just, I would steer clear of the fight, or maybe just look at some of the fun props in there. If you look a little bit at the earlier part of the card, the fight that's drawing a lot of interest is Sean O'Malley against Hollyon Paiva. Why is that drawing interest? Because Sean O'Malley is really, really, really fun to watch. Maybe among the most fun to watch at the UFC level. And this fight kicks off the pay-per-view. So O'Malley, couple of wins already this year. So he's put the Marlon Vera loss from 2020 in the rearview mirror here, it looks like. And he's a pretty significant favorite and probably should cruise in this fight. Cody Garbrandt, the former 135-pound champion, drops down to 125, and he's a slight favorite over Kai Kara France. A lot to be seen for Cody Garbrandt at this point. A lot of times when fighters switch out of what's been their weight class, when they go down, it's usually means that they're probably going to get close to a title and maybe come up a little short. But there's not that far of a path to a title shot for Garbrandt if he wins this one and he comes in as a slight favorite. Jeff Neal and Santiago Ponzinibbio. That's technically Ponzinibbio is a very, very slight favorite. That should be an even fight and a pretty exciting fight as well. That constitutes your main card, and the last 2 of those fights I think should be pretty contentious. But O'Malley I see being able to win with a finish. Preliminary cards. There's not that many names that stand out, but certainly Dominic Cruz, if we're talking about former 135-pound champions, of which had their title taken away from them by previously mentioned Cody Garbrandt. It's Dominic Cruz, and he fights Pedro Munoz. And Cruz comes in at a very slight underdog. He's even money, and Munoz is minus 120. So he comes in as a slight underdog there, and we'll see what that leads to for Dominic Cruz. He's a guy that I never bet against because the fact that he still is out there and training and getting himself back into the cage is it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing with everything that he's been through. And he had, after his 2-fight losing streak that covered, a 4-year span where he lost the title to Garbrandt in 2016 and then came back and fought Henry Cejudo and was trying for the title again at 135. He beat Casey Kenny, split decision back in March. That was UFC 259. So I don't put it against Cruz. He keeps coming back, and he's there. He does his TV commentating stuff, and he's 36 now, and he relies on speed and on one degree and craftiness on the other. And usually at the smaller divisions, speed is one thing that can be a pronounced advantage or a disadvantage once it goes away. So we'll see what happens with Dominic Cruz. He's going to definitely need to win this one if he wants to entertain a good twilight here, a good second half, second act in his career. He's going to have to win fights like this because he's going to have a few of them. One interesting fight that I like, I'm going to pick this one out of the blue. It's going to be on the undercard as well. Erin Blanchfield against Miranda Maverick. And the reason why we throw this one out there is because Blanchfield started out as the favorite in this fight, but the betting line has moved more in this fight than in any other fight on the card. This sort of nondescript women's flyweight fight on the early prelims, ESPN Plus and UFC Fight Pass. By the way, the regular prelims then will be on ESPN Plus, and the main card is a pay-per-view. But I've started to follow Erin Blanchfield because she's from around my hood here in North Jersey, and she's off to a nice little 7-1 start in her career. And she just won against Sarah Alpar back in September. And she, again, went from being the favorite in this fight, and it's been bet completely back the other way. And this fight was originally neither of these two people were actually in it. But Miranda Maverick's now in this fight as the favorite, and she has a little more experience than Blanchfield, but she's actually 24, Blanchfield's 22, so you got a couple of potential young stars here. She's coming off, however, a split decision loss to Macy Barber. So I'd like to see Blanchfield in this one. And now as a slight underdog, I think she's an interesting play there. So I'll throw that out there. And if you're a college football fan, Eric Anders, the former Alabama football player, is on this card, and he's fighting Andre Muniz, and he's a slight favorite at plus 130 to Muniz minus 150. So that's an interesting fight. There's a few others on there, but I think we basically pretty much covered everything we needed to cover to get back on the board here for Rear Naked Choke Radio. Once again, it's good to be back. We'll see what the format does for us here in the upcoming weeks, months, years, whatever it is. But started in 2007 and still going. UFC 269. It piqued my interest, so here I am. And once again, if you have a chance and you want to follow me on Twitter, at Rear Naked Choke, all one word, and the show is at RNC Radio, and I also do another podcast called Diamond Diehards, so check that out at Diamond Diehards. And both podcasts are everywhere you find your podcasts, on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. So that is going to do it for the UFC 269 version, the comeback version again of Rear Naked Choke Radio. for nobody. This is Joe Rizzo. Thanks for listening to Rear Naked Choke Radio, coming at you live.